So I wrote a post this week about my favorite Star Wars movie. So I wrote it for May the 4th, and I said May the 4th is celebrating the 40th anniversary of the best Star Wars movie ever made. Of course, it's the 40th anniversary of The Return of the Jedi, and I knew that people in the comments would be like, no, you're full of shit. It's actually Empire Strikes Back. Serious people would say that. Unserious people would say it's like Revenge of the Sith or something, and that's nonsense. To be fair, Empire is the best Star Wars movie, but I also consider Return of the Jedi the best Star Wars movie. I consider them both the best Star Wars movie, and it occurred to me as I thought about why. I realized it. I think they're one movie. I don't think that the whole original trilogy is one movie. I think it's two movies. There's Star Wars A New Hope. That's one movie. Then there's the other two. That's another movie. Star Wars A New Hope is a complete contained story in and of itself. It was written to be one movie. They didn't know that it would spawn a film franchise, let alone a gigantic franchise with books and toys and yada, yada, yada. That was a hope. But really, when George Lucas and his collaborators came up with Star Wars, the very first one, it wasn't episode 4. It wasn't the first of it was just Star Wars. Later, it became those other things. Later, it became... And you can see when you're watching that movie, like when Obi-Wan calls Darth Vader Darth, very clearly, they had not fully fleshed out these ideas. Darth is more like Mr. than like a name. It's also like a fully contained story. Like, you get the hero's journey of Luke Skywalker from, farm boy on Tatooine to hero of the galaxy who destroyed the Empire. I mean, basically, by the end of that movie, the Empire has been beaten, and the heroes are triumphant. They're being medaled by the princess. Everything's good. Everything's cool. The end. I mean, it really could be the end of the whole story. But no, it's a massive success, so they need to come up with more. Now they come up with the second movie, which is a two-parter. Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Between these two movies, you have a complete arc. You have the young hero, Luke Skywalker, who isn't very good at what he does yet. We see that on Hoth, where he's almost killed by the snow monster, who goes and finds a teacher, Yoda, in Dagobah, and learns and trains in the ways of the Force. But leaves too soon and is defeated by his enemy, Darth Vader, who we learn is his father. None of that was planned in the first movie. That's all planned for the second and third movie. Return of the Jedi, sometime later, Luke comes back, fully trained as a Jedi Knight now, to rescue his friend Han Solo, who was betrayed and captured at the end of the second movie. Who goes and finishes, he's already finished his training. He goes and visits his master Yoda on Dagobah, who then dies. And then he realizes then who his sister is and has to go and confront his father and the Emperor and take down the Empire once and for all. This time, not through the skill or his Force powers, but through love. And the reason I love Return of the Jedi is because it is the emotional heart of the whole story. That scene at the end where Luke goes and fights Darth Vader, and he's, wailing on him with the lightsaber, and the Emperor's laughing, and then he starts Force lightning him, and then Anakin reawakens beneath all that machinery, beneath the helmet, beneath the years of evil, and he awakens and saves his son and comes back to the light and is redeemed and dies. And it's just so awesome. And that on top of, the Endor battle and the Death Star being taken down. And I know the Death Star's taken down again, and it's a little derivative and redundant. But the way I see it, when you think about it this way, is that the first Star Wars was like a rough draft. And then Empire and Return of the Jedi as a single unit was like the finished draft. And they brought back the Death Star, but they changed how it was taken down. It was taken down as this elaborate team up between all these different groups of people. And really, at its core, it was more about Luke going and confronting his father and the Emperor. And it ends on a happy note. What I love about it is, Empire ends very dark, very desperate, very, very scary. Return of the Jedi ends with a happy ending. I heard from someone that apparently some of the people making the movie wanted to kill off Han Solo, and George Lucas was like, why do we have to kill off a character? We don't have to kill off Han Solo. Like, and I'm glad, because now, at the end of that movie, Han Solo and Leia, they get to ride off into the sunset. Luke has found peace. He gets to see his father along with Obi-Wan and Yoda as Force ghosts. His father redeemed and gone to Jedi heaven or whatever. And we wrap things up in this story so nicely, so perfectly. So I can't separate these two films. I can separate them from A New Hope, because that's its own thing, and in a lot of ways serves almost as a prequel to the real story, which we get in the combination of Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. I know people have their complaints about Return of the Jedi. They don't like the Ewoks. I like the Ewoks. I grew up with the Ewoks. Of course I like the freaking Ewoks. They say it's not as well directed or whatever. I don't know. Maybe that's true. I don't see it. And that I can fully admit to my own bias. Growing up with these movies, I can't help it, and I'm fine with that. I also think that some people probably only ever see the edited versions, the ones that Lucas fucked up by putting in CGI and like a terrible like cantina dance number in Jabba the Hutt's palace, which is not there in the original films, and that kind of like makes a mockery of those films. If Disney could do one thing, they could just please release the HD original versions of the original trilogy. It would be so awesome, and they would make a bunch of money. As of now, you have to, and I recommend this, but get Harmy's despecialized edition of the original trilogy. It's a fan-made, a bunch of different people have collaborated, finding old laser discs and old reels and put it together, and they have beautiful HD versions of the unadulterated original trilogy, and it's so great. They're beautiful films. They look amazing. They look great brought up into the Blu-ray era. Like it's awesome. And I wish Disney would just say, you know what, Lucas, I'm sorry, but your edits to these movies are garbage. They are garbage. They diminish everything good about these movies. We're going to release the originals the way they were meant to be. God, I wish. But what's sad, of course, and I will make, this is kind of just another little tangent, and I will make a separate video about this. What's sad about, so Empire and Return of the Jedi tell a perfect story. They tell a story with a wonderful beginning, middle, and end. All the character arcs are resolved in a pretty much perfect way. Luke becomes not just a Jedi Knight, but a victorious hero. Not just because he saves the galaxy, but because he saves his father and his father's legacy, and he brings balance to the Force. And really, honestly, that's where Star Wars should have ended. And then we should have had the books and stuff. And if we wanted to, you could have, if they had made the Thrawn trilogy into some movies, that probably would have been fun. But it was never going to reach the same narrative and emotional heights as the Empire, Return of the Jedi story. And so you get the prequels, which, if anything, they just make that story less awesome, because they try to tell the story of how Anakin fell to the dark side, but we didn't really need it. We didn't really need that story, and ultimately the story that Lucas set out to tell was one that he got bogged down by so many other things, by boring, tedious crap about trade alliances, and he was so obsessed with his CGI tricks that he just didn't really know how to tell a good story. And I know a lot of people love Revenge of the Sith, but I just can't get on board with that. To really love the third movie of a trilogy, I have to love what came before. And I don't. I don't at all. And I don't love the casting. And I think that the core story of a friendship, mentorship/friendship between Obi-Wan and Anakin, that's a good idea, but it just never reached any of the sort of emotional depth that it needed to. And that's also just my age. I know that younger people who grew up with those movies as kids like them more. Unless you're my kids, because I don't like them, so we watched them one time, and I probably talked shit about them the whole time. Anyways, the sequels came around, and they also all they really do is damage to the story that was told so perfectly before. You've got Palpatine returning, you've got, which diminishes Vader, or Anakin, I should say, Anakin's sacrifice and redemptive moment. You have a knockoff set of heroes with, I like Rey, I like Finn, I like Poe Dameron, I like them, but they were never given anything but like to sit in the shadow of the heroes that came before. They were never given an adventure where they all kind of went on it together. And it ultimately just feels like a retread with a less interesting story behind it, with less emotional depth and power. And then you have, you take the happily ever after that you gave Han and Leia, and you make it that they've been estranged because of their twisted psychopath son, and they never even get to see each other again, and they die. And Luke Skywalker, I'm not against the idea that a heroic figure like Luke Skywalker would then face in his later life a challenge that makes him doubt himself. I mean, that feels very real to me. And I think that maybe Rian Johnson was going for something really interesting, but ultimately it was never explored in a way that made it interesting. Like, it was just brushed upon, and then, again, he's dead. They kill off all these characters that we loved, that we haven't seen for 30 years, in the most ungracious way possible. Ungracious? Ingracious? I don't know. I'm probably not saying the word right. Anyways, it's sad because they had a perfect story. They told a perfect story. And then George Lucas wasted it for years, didn't do anything with it, then came out with an atrocious prequel trilogy, sold it all to Disney, and then they screwed it up too. They had all the time in the world to say, hey, what went wrong? Let's make this better. Let's sit down and actually write a full trilogy, start to finish, with character arcs, surprise twists, and they didn't. And it makes no sense. So, for me, my favorite of all Star Wars, those two movies, thinking of them as one movie, one complete story from start to finish. Second favorite, Andor. Andor's brilliant. And if you haven't watched it because you're pissed off at Disney, I get that. But they're actually telling a coherent story that feels real, that feels unique, that doesn't just repeat or rehash the Skywalker stuff. It's great. And then probably after that, I would say Rogue One. That movie's kind of a mess, but it had a lot of good ideas. It did a lot of stuff well. It's kind of, in some ways, though, a prequel to a prequel, if you think of Star Wars A New Hope as a prequel to the true central story of Luke Skywalker, Anakin Skywalker, and the gang. Yeah. Anyways, what do you think? Does that make sense? What's your favorite Star Wars? Let me know in the comments. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching. Peace.